3rd at 10 a.m. And it's a Tuesday, which means it is time to track the tropics. From sunny and hazy Central Florida, I'm WESH 2 meteorologist Eric Burris.
Yeah, definitely hazy in Savannah. I'm WJCL 22, Chief Meteorologist Jeremy Nelson.
All right, so the haze, by the way, I've had so many people ask, I'm sure you probably have too. It's from Canadian wildfires, Jeremy.
Yeah, and this is probably, I would say, the third go around, at least maybe fourth, with some smoke in our area.
Yeah, and that's why we've been waking up to nice, cool temperatures the last couple of days because of all of that kind of northerly wind. So that's that. But we're not here to just talk about that. We're here to talk about the tropics. So, Jeremy, let's just kind of set the stage and see what's doing out there right now.
All right, and my dog is excited for tracking the tropics here.
That's fine. That's
barking in the background. Anyone that walks outside my house, he decides to greet them.
So. Yeah, no, it's all good. It's all good. We love dogs. It's all good.
We do. So we just have Tropical Storm Philippe out there. It's been models sort of wavering. Is it going to be a hurricane, stay a tropical storm? It might get close, but the good news, it should be staying far away from our areas.
Yeah, so here's a look at the latest satellite imagery. Notice that Philippe is not over like Puerto Rico or the Virgin Islands at all, but it's dumping rains across parts of the Antilles. There have been some pretty significant flooding registrations coming into the database, Jeremy. And this is one of those cases where you just can't say to yourself like, oh, it's just a tropical storm, or, oh, it's just not going to hit us directly, because here's a prime example of the storm is kind of skirting the islands there, but it is quite an impactful system for folks living there.
Right, and some of those islands have pretty good terrain on them out there in the Caribbean there, kind of the southwestern part of the Atlantic. So you throw 5-10 inches of rain on some higher terrain, you can get some pretty serious runoff issues and flooding concerns. This will head north, so at least it moves away from there, and then it seems like almost every storm this year wants to just brush by Bermuda.
Yeah, which is good. I mean, they've had years where they've gotten hit over and over and over again. Super glad that that's not the case this year. But for the moment, like you said, things are looking good. And there's nothing else, by the way, behind Philippe. Rena did develop, kind of danced around, did a little Fujiwara action. But at the moment, that's kind of what we've got for now. But of course, there's always room for Jello looking kind of down the pike a little bit.
Yeah, and here we are. This is our first update in the month of October. So the long-range forecast method we use, we really start to get laser focused on what may be looking new in the Gulf, the Caribbean, the Atlantic, because we're already starting to look ahead to next season. Obviously, we're focused on this one, but we're starting to gather the clues for next season's hurricane season forecast. So we'll be guiding you through that. I guess one of the things we're kind of looking at is maybe Gulf of Mexico in mid-October.
Yeah, this time of year, you always end up seeing these areas of low pressure forming on old cold fronts. It's a tale as old as time. We'll get in Florida, and I'm sure in your area as well, Jeremy, you'll get a front. It'll be so exciting, like we're going to get a big chill, and then the front dies, and then a little bubble up of moisture will show up. Whether or not it develops into something tropical is kind of less important than just the overall idea that an area of low pressure develops. And then we kind of start filtering that into that hurricane season forecast for next year.
Yeah, and our hurricane season forecast, as many of you know, comes out on March the 1st. So we really focus October, November, pattern setting up, and then we look for some of those reflections and recycles December, January, into February. And then we gather all our clues, and we're really looking for those low pressure areas, stronger features. And we really focus in on Caribbean Gulf and probably that western third of the Atlantic, because if we studied the North Atlantic, the Eastern Atlantic, we'd probably go crazy. So we just keep it simplified because we want to keep everyone here updated what kind of may be lurking the next season.
So here we are getting into that new cycle, which I need to start logging. Have you started your logging yet?
Since I'm off today, so that's something I will be doing. I'm going to start getting that all set and mark the first 3 days down, and here we go.
All right. So that said, then what's ahead, right? Let's take a look and see what's doing on the long-range models here. We begin with the GFS, and there is on the bottom right corner there There's Philippe kind of passing very near the islands. This is the operational GFS. This is the 6Z run, kind of lifting up to the north. There it is. That's Friday, 2 p.m. near Bermuda. Passing by, a little moisture around. And then after that, kind of just watching, notice blues and even greens showing up over the Gulf of Mexico. That's the 13th of October, the 14th of October. There's a cold front kind of moving into the deep south. And at least according to the latest run of the GFS, right there, kind of an old frontal boundary, developing an area of low pressure off of Florida's east coast, moving away. And then at the same time, look around the Caribbean, another little area of low pressure trying to develop. So the GFS is trying to figure something out. If we go back, though, let's go back in time just a little bit, all right? And let's go back from the 00Z, from the 6Z to the 00Z, Jeremy, because watch the Gulf of Mexico there. That's the 14th of October, and interestingly enough, you've got, at least on the 00Z, you've got a little area of low pressure trying to form and kind of head into the panhandle.
Yeah, and if we remember back to last week when we were doing this on Tuesday, we were talking about the other method we use, the BSR, which is a Bering Sea rule. We take a specific area in the North Pacific that we've sort of learned to tie about 15 to 19 days down the road to our part of the country. So the surface map you're looking at is actually the North Pacific, but we have the outline of the U.S. to kind of gauge this. So it's complex, but we're pretty much just looking at the middle part of October and really focused on the Gulf of Mexico. There might be one or two opportunities in there for low pressure or something tropical to get going.
Yeah, like this, for example, that's around the 15th of October. But interestingly enough, beyond that, there's another reflection around the 18th of October. So do both happen? Probably not. But, it's interesting that the BSR methodology, at least, is kind of showing a couple of opportunities for storm systems, whether they're frontal genesis or whether they're kind of a tropical in nature. So that's the BSR showing those. But if we come back to the model data, you can very clearly see at least the 00Z was showing something trying to bubble up in the Gulf of Mexico. If we go back 2 model runs, Jeremy, you're not really seeing that much. You're seeing something of an area of low pressure, but I think that what's ending up happening, I'll go back to the live, most recent run. The model's trying to figure something out. It's trying to find lowering pressure, and I think that at this point, that's all we can read into on the GFS.
Right, and we're also still like 300 plus hours out, and generally, I would say anything over 180 hours when it comes to tropics, not very reliable. So right now we're looking at clues out there. We're sort of watching to see if that low pressure, which matches our thoughts, is showing up, and it definitely has in some of the model runs.
Yeah. I'm just kind of tweaking around. I'm looking at the long range European. Look at that. That's the 16th right there.
Yeah. So I think that window is probably about the 14th to 18th, maybe 13th to 18th in there. Really centered around maybe, what was it, like 15th or so?
Yeah, I think so. And
go ahead.
I was just going to say we could also look at the ensembles too if you want to kind of get an idea of what they're spitting out.
Yeah, let's definitely do that. And then after that, let's take a look at water temperatures, because we're starting to get to the time of year they're cooling down quickly. And I'll talk about ours by the coast, which have dropped a lot, and then we can kind of look into the Gulf.
Perfect. Yeah, sounds good. All right, so this is the GFS ensemble. Top right corner, that's Monday, the 9th of October. Watch, though, how we're starting to see ensemble members trying to throw stuff together. Its timing is completely off. Its locations are completely off, but you've got a bunch of the members trying to show something there from about the 12th to about the 18th. So GFS ensemble members are showing something. If we look at the European ensemble members, there's the 5th, 6th. I have to go to the 0Z just to go long enough out. But notice again, right there, there's the 14th, the 15th, the 16th. So you're starting to see some of these ensemble members picking up on something. So again, it's way out there, but using our methodology, Jeremy, it definitely gives the indication that it's probably something worth at least monitoring. And we've been discussing this for what, a week, 2 weeks time, 3 weeks time?
Yeah, I think the first time we talked about it was last week on our Tracking the Tropics, I believe. And then I know kind of offline here, we've been talking about this for a little while. So
Right.
I would say with the BSR, we get more of realistically about 3 week lead time or so, somewhere in there from when we see the maps, because those I really like to use. There's and if we ever want to, maybe in the comments we could post just so if people want to play meteorologist at home. That site that we look at, that North Pacific, let me find it here. I have it bookmarked somewhere. Our site that we look at the maps for. Oh, here, it's actually the Ocean Prediction Center.
Yep.
And if you go to it, it'll say analysis and forecast, and then just go to Pacific products.
Right, and it's the North Pacific surface, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And then I just like I like to keep it sort of simple with that, since it is kind of a complex thing that we are. We really just look at the next 96 hours, because realistically, we're fast forwarding that by like 2.5, 3 weeks.
Right. I like to play further just for interesting sake, but it does always change. But it's if I always talk about our long range forecasting, like you're on a road and you see a car coming and it's foggy and you don't know what kind. I mean, it's really thickening the fog when you go even further than 96 hours out. But anyway, I digress. All right, Jeremy, talk about the water temperatures for the nearshore waters from your area all the way down through the Gulf and the Caribbean.
Okay, well, obviously here for the southeast coastline, we know we can still be impacted by tropical systems or even hurricanes. For my area, the water temperature now along my coast, that says 79. That must be offshore a little bit, closer to the Gulf Stream, because right by my coastline, it's now 76 degrees.
Yep.
So the temperatures are starting to come down. If we would have something approach the southeast coast, it would probably, I would think, start to be in a weakening phase or something like that, because our water temps here are starting to drop pretty quickly. We've been consistently now low to mid 60s at night, and daytime highs like low to mid 80s. So we're not warming the water each and every day, probably a net cooling a little bit. But you look at the Gulf, you can talk about that. That is still very warm.
Yeah, well, and that's why when we look to the month of October, you're absolutely watching the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean Sea, because water temperatures are still in play. The way we think about it is, the beginning of hurricane season, it's very close to land. And then by about, July, August, even September, the entire Atlantic is open for business. But then when you get into late September, October, November, you start to close it in. As a matter of fact, give me 2 seconds here, and I will, if I could spell October with a B instead of a V, here's the kind of development areas for the month of October. All right, you're really looking at the Caribbean and the Gulf and things kind of sliding through there, but it's really just the areas highlighted in green there. So we start turning off the open Atlantic just a little bit because the wind shear starts picking up. And another thing, Jeremy, too, which I thought was kind of interesting, look at the Saharan dust layer. There's actually quite a bit of Saharan dust in the open Atlantic.
Yeah, and that tends to suppress tropical development. And if you look right now, Philippe, that is west of that drier, dusty air. So that's why that one is still kind of just maintaining the tropical storm status. It will start to head to the north, and that will keep it away from the dusty air. But we likely won't be seeing a lot developing now off from the west coast of Africa. Those tropical waves, fewer and fewer the later we get into fall.
Yep. So that all said, at the moment, there's nothing crazy, right? It's October 3rd. Still have a couple of months of hurricane season. So don't sound the all clear. Remember, Central Florida got hit with Hurricane Nicole what month was it, Jeremy? What month?
November.
That's right. Yeah. So I think that was a wake-up call for a lot of people, at least in my area. Like, oh, November really is still hurricane season. And granted, They don't love to be that strong that time of year, but they can still happen. And for us internally doing our long-range forecast, I feel like this is perhaps the most important phase of hurricane season, because now we're looking ahead to what will be for next year.
Yeah, and October, even if we don't get a name system, we think there probably will be one or two during October. But even if we don't have any named storms, we're looking for those sort of areas of interest.
Yeah.
And if we happen to get a low into the Gulf or something like that, it's something we'll note, because what ended up being Idalia never was a tropical system last fall. That was an area of low pressure we tracked in kind of that northeastern Gulf, and it repeated. And you know what? That was a good example that you don't need
Yeah.
a tropical system October, November with the method we use to project forward into the following season.
Right. And conversely, was it Lee that stayed just off of our East Coast? That was the reflection of Nicole?
Yep. Yeah, and that one really, in the grand scheme of things, if you look back to Nicole, it was near the Bahamas or even east of the Bahamas when it started to develop. So Lee was actually very close at one point to where Nicole started off.
Right. So it's interesting. And what's really cool for me is that we have this new kind of venue this year to be able to share what we're looking at. And I think if we do this right, when we put out our hurricane forecast March 1st, Jeremy, it shouldn't be a shock to our viewers. They should have a pretty decent idea if they're watching our Tracking the Tropics broadcasts.
Yeah, because we'll step people through it. Right now, we just have Philippe out there, and we're kind of like, hey, let's watch that middle part of October. Could be something out there. And then maybe the Gulf ends up sort of shutting off a little bit, and our focus will start going down into the Caribbean because I think late October, there could be a pretty potent cold front that comes sweeping in. And if that makes it down to the Gulf or something, maybe that stalls over the Caribbean, and would watch the tail end of that, like you always mentioned about some formation along that.
Oh, 100%. So this is where I get to say, all right, let's look way out there on the BSR. I'm like, ooh, a squirrel. All right, so BSR, we'll just go way out there. Let me show you, Jeremy. There is, first off, just by reading, that's the end of October. That's like Halloween week. You've got a massive storm system way north of your and my area, but there's a big old honking cold front pushing in.
Yeah, and we were talking about this earlier, how just like once you get to November 1st, that northern part of the country, you can get full-on winter systems with that. You can get huge cold weather outbreaks. Still in the record books, the storm that I went through in 1991 was a Halloween blizzard in the upper Midwest. Really 3 days of snow. There was about 1 to 2 feet of snow in portions of the upper Midwest. And then after that, temperatures were below zero, the records that still stand for that first week of November. And that was actually, we were kind of mini debating this, but I believe that's what the perfect storm was made after.
Yeah, well, and down here in Central Florida, it brought massive severe weather. I just remember all the cars having hail. I felt like every car was just beat to snot with hail back then.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe with El Nino this year, again, it's not one size fits all, but we'll have to watch severe weather possibilities this year.
100%. Yeah, that jet stream pushes further south. I think you and I are going to be quite busy. So if that's going to be that's the day before Halloween, give or take. Okay. Showing a decent cold front and a decent storm system north of us. But here's something also interesting. The BSR has been pretty consistent in this kind of idea of around the 1st of November, some sort of a little storm system perhaps kind of bubbling up near South Florida. So that's going to be another thing. So we've got kind of this mid-October thing to watch, and then perhaps this end of October, early November signal as well. Again, you're talking a long way out there, but using methodology, it's at least an idea through a teleconnection.
Yeah, and right now, we do have some clues longer range, but again, we don't have our sort of our secret weapon
right
at this point for long range. So we're just trying to show people some other methods that might lead us to an early indication of what may be happening weeks down the road.
I always like using our little techniques because if nothing else, it just gives you an idea so that when you start seeing things on the models, it I think it adds a little. If nothing else, it adds a little bit of perhaps framework there, like, oh, I think I know what you're trying to do, you know?
Right. Yeah. And do you happen, I get asked this question now that we've had a busy season, do you have the storm names up there?
Give me 2 seconds.
And then we can just briefly mention that we have 4 names left on the list, I think, and then if by chance we would get through those, then there is a supplemental list of storm names that starts with Adria.
Yeah. So Sean, Tammy, Vince, and Whitney are the only ones left.
Okay, and we've had 6 hurricanes this year, I believe.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep.
And we'll see. Philippe maybe has an outside chance of that, but if it stays a tropical storm, we'll stay at 6. And maybe we get another October, November hurricane, but hopefully things will be winding down.
Agreed. All right, so let's look at the numbers then. You were mentioning that. Let's just take a look. And right off the bat, we've had 18 total named storms. That includes the January no name, which is always this inception thing, but it is what it is. Through today, the average is 11.1, and through this date last year, Jeremy, we had 9 named storms.
Yeah, and I think last year we ended with 14.
Something like that.
I think so.
Yeah.
So it really picked up October, November, and then maybe this year's the opposite, but we will see, because it's definitely a clue for the next season, and we've talked about that quite a bit. So
Yeah,
you can
right.
talk about, what is the storm names here?
Named storm days.
Yes, the days.
Yeah, so 83.7 named storm days. The 30-year average through today, 54.3. Last year, it only had 41. And to add to that, Jeremy, yeah, because we saw such an active October, November, you and I were in March of this year saying it was going to be a busy hurricane season, when I feel like the meteorological community thought we were crazy to say that. But here we are, brushing our shoulders off, just saying.
Yeah, there was definitely headwinds going into this season that was against it being anywhere pretty much above 14 named storms. And we were really like, wow, last year, for what we use methodology, was very busy October, November. So that kind of led us to the forecast of 14 to 18 named storms. We might end up being above that, but I think if you compare our forecast to the others that came out, we're pretty happy about where we ended up.
Yeah. Lawrence points out, and I think that this is really interesting. He mentioned this on your page, Jeremy. So notwithstanding all the activity, it feels to this layman that it's been an easy hurricane season, at least so far. Have we just been lucky with impacts on the United States, or is it El Nino that has been the reason? I think that's a great question, Lawrence.
Yeah, so obviously it just takes one storm for someone to say it's been an active season. And I think that northeast part of Florida would say, you know what, this was pretty active. We had what was likely a major hurricane that made landfall there. So we had that one. We also had, it didn't do much. It was more of a rainmaker. We had Harold down in the South Texas area, and then we had Ophelia that definitely had some coastal flooding issues with it. If you get 2 feet of water that comes into your home, that's a big deal. So we definitely had some impactful systems move through this year, but maybe not the blockbuster hurricane like an Ian.
Right. Well, I mean, Idalia was so powerful, but it moved in such a rural area that when we were in the helicopter the day after Idalia made landfall, it was like you're just flying 20, 30 miles between these cities and towns. And it's just like, You could clearly see where the northeast eye wall moved into a rural area, like one of those unpopulated areas. You're like, boy, if this was Miami-Dade County, this would have been a mess, you know?
Yeah, so I definitely don't want to discount that storm. And then when it comes to El Nino again, to me, it's kind of hard to gauge the exact impact, because if you take El Nino on the surface, it should not have been busy this season.
100%. So it takes one storm to hit you, but if you don't get hit, it's an easy hurricane season. All right, last point of data, because everybody loves nerding out. ACE, it's the helpful place, but it's also accumulated cyclonic energy. So this year we have generated 127 ACE points through today. The 30-year average through today, 98.0. Last year through today was 87. So we are already sitting at greater than average in terms of ACE points, just if it were to end today.
Yep. And we'll be adding a little bit to this if we don't get any big hurricanes or anything like that. Might not add a lot to it, but yeah, the ACE score pretty much, I think they've said now since it got above a certain number, it's termed an active season.
Yep. And that's fine. To me, that's kind of where you and I were at. So I'm okay with that metric being hit. If nobody gets hit with a hurricane at all in a year, I'm totally okay with that as well. You know, I want to know that our forecast is at least in the realm. So I'm fine. I'm good. I don't want anybody.
Whoa, I like that.
It like does that randomly, and I don't know why.
That's a cool effect though.
Yeah, I have no idea how to even recreate that. It's like we're being all professional, and then I get fireworks. It's like if I were to turn into a hot dog. You've seen those videos, like
yeah.
Jeez. Anyway, I totally lost my train of thought because I decided to go fireworks on you.
That was pretty cool, though. Yeah, can't even try to replicate that. So yeah, so that's where we're at right now. We just have Tropical Storm Philippe out there. Comments on my side. Miss Ann is on here today. Hello to her. Kevin is on. I know he's very loyal to our updates here on Tuesdays. Looks like Lawrence that you mentioned was on there, and a couple other people. I was trying to get all the comments. Sometimes Facebook is weird, and I'm trying to get all the comments up, and I say show all of them, and then it doesn't.
Yeah, Spencer is talking about how last year seemed worse than this season, and I think that goes to the actual landfalls. And, you know, Jeremy, Max Mayfield, former director of the Hurricane Center, was always so clear about how you could have a very quiet hurricane season, and he loved referencing 92, right? Like the first named storm was in August. Happened to be a Category 5, happened to strike, at the time it was called Dade County, happened to be Andrew, you know. It only takes one. You get one storm in a quiet season, that's a terrible hurricane season for those people.
Yeah, it's just all about where they hit, and if it hits your area, that is that's an active season.
Yeah.
And one that you'll never forget. So this one is not done yet, and I think next up we'll have to watch the golf.
Yeah. Anything else? I'm pretty much good with that.
Yeah, I think that's good for today, and by this time next week, that would be around the 10th. I would say we'll be within about 120 hours or so of what could be in the Gulf, and we'll have some good models to track.
Yeah, and either way, computer models are also talking about next Monday being a pretty decent cold front. Hope that thing doesn't break your or my heart, Jeremy.
I know. Although, like I said, we've had some decent cooler mornings now. We've been in the low 60s, but I don't think we've been in the 50s yet since probably like last May, I think it was.
Yep. We could look. We could look. You've got the ACIS website, right?
Yeah, I can. I have all the archive data.
Yeah.
I won't bore people with that, but yeah, cooler weather this time of year is usually good. If we're talking cold in January, people may be less excited about that.
Yeah, agreed. All right, enough is enough. Hey, I'm the chief tonight, so we'll be working. So I don't know there was something I needed to do for you. I'll do it tonight.
All right, I am off today, but
that's right. Never mind.
Definitely touch base with you, and I work at an ABC affiliate. And Eric's at NBC. Today, we actually have baseball on during the afternoon, so some of our early shows are not happening.
Oh, I'll be there 4, 5, 5:30, 6, 10. Wait, 4, 5, 5:30, 6, 7, 10, 11.
Yeah, I think today, potentially, our first show would be at 5:30 or 6. Normally, it's at 4 p.m.
Got it. Debbie says, notice how Eric didn't read our comments. Y'all are talking about costumes. What? I'm not going to read costume comments. Like a vault. All right, people. I will see y'all at 3:30 on my page, but for now, that's it here. From sunny, hazy Central Florida, I'm WESH 2 meteorologist Eric Burris.
And in Savannah, Georgia, from WJCL 22, I'm Chief Meteorologist Jeremy Nelson.
Thanks for working on your day off, buddy.